Good morning, everybody. Hope you had a great weekend. I did. Went out with some friends, with my girlfriend, and did some stuff and played some parkour. It was a whole lot of fun. So, let's get into the topic for the day. Welcome back to the New Republican series. This is part 4. Is this titled Sex? Maybe. I think I'm just going to call it Sex. But really it's about sex, dating, gender ideology, abortion, and marriage. And really what it comes down to is family values. So, why is the topic of sex so contentious in politics? I want to tell you a little bit about my early journey and when I started getting political. And, I think a lot of people can relate to this. Now, I grew up in the Bible Belt. I grew up Southern Baptist. Everyone around me was conservative. And the sex ed class at the time was essentially, don't do it, you'll get, German herpes or whatever. And it was like the topic about sex, what you couldn't talk about it without it being like, oh yeah, it's bad, by the way, you shouldn't do it until marriage. It's like the devil is tempting us, and like they treated it like it was some sort of crime or a predatory thing, which is kind of funny that feminists have kind of the same opinion about sex that a lot of Baptists do, which is that women don't really want sex, and that if a man has sex with a woman, he's actually taking advantage of her because she's actually just lonely and sad and is using sex for validation or something to make her feel loved. And I mean, there might be some truth to that, but I mean, to think that women aren't also horny creatures is ridiculous. And so, I kind of developed a bad idea about what sex was like. And when I became an atheist, all of a sudden, I didn't see any moral reason not to have sex for fun. Hooking up and all that. It was like, there's nothing wrong with it. Why should I save myself for marriage in front of God when I don't believe in God? Why should I save myself for marriage for even for a legal wedding? I mean, at the time, I was an anarchist. At least for a long time, I was an anarchist. I still kind of am in my heart, but just because the existence of communists and certain political ideologies that are too evil, that are trying to spread, it's really hard to make the argument that, anarchism is correct. So anyways, when it comes to sex, right, a lot of people think that the religious right are prudes, that they don't want you to have sex and that sex is wrong. Well, that's not really true. That's not the case. It's kind of the opposite of the case. In reality, they want you to get married and then have a bunch of sex with your wife or your husband and make a ton of babies. That's kind of what they should want if they're being true to their political stance. Now, for whatever reason, the boomers, people my generation who were raised by boomers, you had a different experience with them than most conservatives did over history. Because throughout human history, there was, you get married, you have kids, you raise your kids go out, get married, have kids, raise their kids, etc., etc., etc. With the boomers, it was a little different. It's like they had less family values than pretty much any other generation before or after. And so we were kind of raised in weird ways that didn't really, correspond to the normal thing. Like, I wasn't allowed to date for the most part. My boomer mom didn't want me to, have a girlfriend or ever be alone with a girl ever. And so that kind of messed me up in my teenage years. But that's not universal. And, you know, I don't want to get too personal on this channel, not just because, and not because I'm like a shy guy, but because I don't want anyone using it against me. And I know there's people on the left that will like dig through my stuff and be like, oh, that happened to you. Oh, this happened to you. Or now I know, you know, this information, and I don't want that to happen. So I'll just get into the topic straight away. When it comes, like, there's two ways you can look at sex. Okay, you can look at sex as the main goal, as in, you know, the way I look at women is I just want to bang them. And, you know, same for girls, is like you look at men like, oh, I want to hook up. And, you know, whatever benefits come from having a boyfriend or girlfriend to an extent, if you do decide to actually have one. But these days, hookup culture is so prevalent that a lot of people just have friend groups and then they just have sex when they want to and go out and get laid. And getting laid is like a weekend fun activity. And that's it. So remember how I said that the difference between the right and the left has a lot to do with consequences? So look at it like this. The right wants freedom of choice, and freedom of choice requires the consequences that result from the choices that we make. The left wants freedom from consequences. They want to avoid consequences, which ultimately would have to require the lack of freedom of choice. That's why the farther left countries go, you see the choices start to dry up, where you have less options. Free speech disappears because you have to have free speech in order to have freedom of choice. Because if you're restricted from hearing certain opinions, you're not getting all the information with which to make a proper, well-informed choice. So, what does that have to do with sex and dating? Well, you know, in sex ed, we're given, at least in decent sex ed, you're given at least like the basic understanding of physically what happens to the body that makes it sexually mature. In women, they get their first period. In men, actually, there is one, besides just puberty and you getting taller and getting your voice deeper, is that if you have your whole genitals, which you should, if you had decent parents that, you know, respected your rights, then your foreskin actually starts to separate from the glands or the head of the penis, because that's fused up until you're about 12, 13 or whatever, and then the foreskin starts to glide back and forth, which is how sexual movement works. Without a foreskin, you kind of have to just figure out on your own how the penis works for sex, because there's no moving parts anymore. So, on the right, let's talk about, you know, bodily autonomy. When it comes to bodily autonomy, you have people that support circumcision, which are pretty much the American conservatives, and that's it. People on, and, you know, there's some other people, you know, Muslims, Jews, they support circumcision, of course, but worldwide, they're pretty much the only ones. There's also some people that are not religious or whatever, but usually American, that mistakenly believe that there's some health benefits to circumcision. There's not. There's no health benefits to circumcision. Morally speaking, it's evil. You're amputating healthy skin off of a baby who cannot consent to it. So, that, you know, that's fucked up. And that's his body. The foreskin is a part of his body. Now, this is why a lot of us get angry at the bodily autonomy argument from abortionists. Now, bodily autonomy simply means, you know, bodily is a part of your body. Autonomy means control over your body. And, you know, that's kind of why circumcision is wrong. That's one of the reasons. But it's also why abortion is wrong, interestingly enough. Because my rights end where your rights begin. When it comes to sex and dating, like I was saying, we like consequences, because a world where you avoid consequences is going to have a lot of hidden payments and hidden costs that are just not worth it. So if you want to base your life around sex, well, there's consequences to sex. The very real and common consequence is babies. So if you are, having sex every weekend with strangers, you might wind up getting someone pregnant or getting pregnant by someone you can't contact later. You don't even have their number. You just have their Tinder, and then they can block you on Tinder right after they bang you, and then you're stuck raising a kid by yourself. Well, you might think to yourself, well, that's fine. We have welfare. We have government assistance. We have all this stuff. Or I'll just get an abortion. All of these are terrible choices because, and without getting too deep into abortion, just look at it from a biological perspective. If you were a animal researcher and you stumbled upon a population of animals that, let's say it was crocodiles, right? They had a little nest of eggs on the shore. They have these fertilized eggs. They bury them in the sand, and then they just start stomping on all of them. They start crushing all of their eggs. Would you think that's a healthy crocodile? Or would you think there's something wrong with that crocodile? That can't be healthy. You would think there's something wrong with that crocodile because abortion it violates the natural state of human life. It also takes the consequences out of sex. And when there's no consequences in sex, people make terrible choices that affect all of society. So why did we ever have all these strict rules about sex? That you have to be married first, or that, you have to always be chaperoned and things like that? Well, it's because, for one, men don't want to raise another man's kid. That's a really big deal. If I see a woman that I like and I decide to give her everything of mine, as in I marry her, she gets my house, she gets to, raise my kids, I go out and hunt and work and do all these hard labor things, and she benefits hugely from all of that. I take care of her, I keep her alive, and then she goes and gets pregnant by another man, and I have to raise this kid without knowing it's not mine. My genetic line is dead. From a biological, natural selection perspective, my line just ended. So men don't want to be with the woman that sleeps around. That's the consequence. Because keep in mind, abortion didn't exist until very recently. Yes, of course, there were ways to do it back in the day, but it was not nearly as freely accessible as it is now in a lot of ways, and it wasn't as obvious of a topic as it is these days. So, why did we develop marriage and things like that? It was so a woman would know under certain circumstances it's safe for me to have sex with a man. Because back then, if you had sex with a man and he left, he didn't stick around, and there's no guarantee that he would unless he was married to you, then you would be pregnant and screwed. You would have no way to take care of the baby because for 9 months you weren't able to do physical labor, and there had to be physical labor because all labor back then was physical. There were no HR departments in 1207. So you had to do physical labor to survive, and if you have this bowling ball sticking out of your stomach, it's pretty hard to do that. And then when you have a screaming newborn baby, you kind of have to give him all of your attention or else he'll die. They're extremely needy. So that's why they would need a man to bring you things. You can sit in a bed in a nice hut for a few months with your newborn, breastfeeding and all that, and the man goes out and brings you food and fixes the roof and does all sorts of stuff. So women evolved this desire for stability from men, and men evolved, we want a nurturing woman who would take care of the baby, and every physical trait that we look for in a woman has to do with fertility. We like big breasts because that produces lots of milk and it's a sign of youth, and wide hips because that means she's less likely to die from childbirth, etc., etc. And also youth. We like young women because they have more baby making years ahead of them. That's just biology. You have to accept it, or because it's reality. Accept reality or fuck off, So What does this have to do with abortion and marriage and all that? Well, this is what created strong families. Now, why are strong families important? I probably should have started with that. If you look at studies of criminals, almost all of them were raised, at least like the violent criminals, thieves, they were raised by single mothers. Now, single mothers they can be very permissive, where that you kind of just get away with everything. And they also can be really authoritarian. They don't really have the masculine ability to teach you a ton of hands-on skills and values that come from that. Sometimes some are better than others, of course. But for the most part, a lot of single mothers get on welfare, and they don't teach their kids the value of work or of looking for what to look for in a man. They might badmouth the kid's father all the time, so the child doesn't want to have a husband or to even be a man. So like, you kind of need a two-parent household, because like I said, in all these studies, so many criminals, like almost all of them, were raised by single moms, and they had an absent father. So like, you need a father figure in the house to have a functioning life in a lot of ways. And it even affected their health. Like, people who were raised by single mothers tend to live shorter lives than people that were raised by two-parent loving households. And you can have a dysfunctional two-parent household, of course, but the better house that you grow up in, not like the size of the house, but I mean like the better family. Like, you could grow up in a mansion with a dysfunctional single mother, and you are worse off than someone who grew up in an apartment with two loving parents. Simply because you need to learn the right lessons. Humans are unique amongst the animals, and that we are not instinct driven as nearly as much as we are learning driven. We learn lessons when we're young, and we apply them throughout our lives. If you don't learn the right lessons when you're young, it's a lot harder to learn them when you're older and develop the right behavior than it is to just start healthy from the beginning. I mean, that's what therapy is for. People that had both parents at home and the parents loved them and took care of them rarely need therapy. It's usually people who grew up in single mothers, households, that need therapy. And I mean, look, there's a billion different YouTube videos and places out there for you to watch that teaches the harm of being raised by a single mother. And I don't need to go into too much of that. I think you probably already know. If you don't, just look into it, And so that's kind of why, like, when you have abortion in society, not only is it like, okay, my rights end where your rights begin because you're a separate body, you're a unique bundle of DNA, and I'm a unique bundle of DNA, so we're each unique life forms. That's why I shouldn't steal from you, I shouldn't attack you, and vice versa. When it comes to abortion, well, that baby in your stomach is not you. That is something you are responsible for, that you created. That is a separate life form. Your rights end where its rights begin. So you are obligated, morally speaking, if there's a baby inside of you, you are morally obligated to take care of it. And that's why, like, conservatives, Republicans, people on the right, because we believe in consequences, not only is it a consequence of your choice, but even when it's not, because we believe in the sanctity of life and the value of human life, that baby, even if it wasn't your choice, that's still a unique life form. That's a human. That's still a unique human life. And there's a little bit of gray on the right when it comes to abortion, because sometimes it is medically necessary, And that's actually extremely rare. I think only like 1% of abortions are medically necessary, and we're never talking about that. You know, if your baby's going to be born with severe physical disabilities that would just completely ruin its life, or you know, give it a short life where it would only live for maybe a few months, like certain things like that, you'll find most people on the right are okay with. Even with rape babies, you know, a lot of people on the right are okay with, oh, you were raped, okay, yeah, an abortion's fine. But the morning after pill is not an abortion, because it has not developed nerve endings or anything that can feel pain. I think for libertarians, and all libertarians, if they're consistent with libertarianism, are against circumcision and are against abortion. At least after it has developed nerve endings, which is very soon. If it can feel pain and you abort it, you're hurting it. You're killing it and you're hurting it. That is a violation of the non-aggression principle. So that goes against libertarianism. And any libertarian that doesn't agree with that is either lying to get more people to join the party, or they just don't understand what libertarianism is. And that's more often the case. So what's a consequence of abortion existing in a civilization? Well, women for thousands of years used to be forced by nature to not only look for men that they wanted to bang, because let me tell you a little bit about men and women, okay? Us men, we are players by design. We have an instinct to bang as many chicks as we can. But we also have a protective instinct. We want to protect and take care of a woman. That's like half of our dating instinct. So even before puberty, us boys have defensive instincts towards girls. And once we hit puberty, it kind of amplifies. That we understand, okay, girls are delicate, they're not built for fighting like we are. So it's not right for us to hurt them. And in fact, we should protect them. And that's like an instinct that we have. And women's instincts are to, at least, you know, I'm not talking about little girls. I don't really know much about, you know, little kid women. But adult women, their instincts are to find a man who will protect them and take care of them, that's stable, that also they want to bang, that they're attracted to. So if a woman can just get an abortion, then all these stable men are no longer getting laid. They're no longer getting girlfriends. Because let's face it, only about 14% of men are over 6 feet tall. And less than that percent of those men are also rich. And also, you know, like if you ask a woman what she's really attracted to, she'll give off this whole laundry list of things that like 0.5% of men meet this criteria. So what that ultimately means is that if women are being true to their standards, then most men are not getting laid. A small percentage of men are getting all the women, and that's leaving a lot of men single and not happy, you know, lonely, angry, aggressive. It means that if there are any babies being made, they're being raised by the government, which means they're being forced. That means that all the men that the women don't want to be with are being forced to pay for the children of the men that the women do want to be with, but they don't want to be with them. You know, so you got your Chads, top 1% of men, banging all the chicks, impregnating all the chicks. Those women are either getting abortions, or they're having the kid and the state's raising the kid. And then maybe she'll let one of these chump beta men raise the kid, thinking it's his, which happens a lot. Or she'll stay single, have the state raise the kid through welfare, which raises taxes on all the rest of us. And it, basically ruins civilization, because not only do you have a lot of bitter taxpayers that hate the government and the country they live in, they hate the women around them because none of them will date them, but we're still being forced to pay for these women through taxation, which is evil, because men are happy to pay for women if the women are giving us something in return. No one is owed anything for free. Remember, I've said that a few times. No one is owed anything for free. You have to pay consequences for your actions. If you want something, you have to pay for it. You have to earn it one way or another. A woman wants a man to, okay, I have a girlfriend. I would do anything for my girlfriend. But you know what? She would also do anything for me. We have a loving, healthy relationship. Now, so many men these days, if they are out dating, they're with these women. They're trying to date women, modern women, that do not believe they owe men anything. Do not believe they will ever owe men anything, and are exclusively looking for a man to provide for them all sorts of fun and entertainment and whatnot. And they're not expected to give anything in return. And a lot of men are just choosing not to date. Okay, so that is the consequence of abortion being legal. It's a consequence of the welfare state, because a woman has no more natural incentive to look for a man who will take care of her. Women are really drawn to two different types of men, okay? They're attracted to the man they want to have sex with, who's, tall, charismatic, whatever. Then they're attracted to stability, which is a man with a good job, the, loving father type, the guy who's going to stick around, take care of the kids. They like both things. But throughout most of human history, because of just nature, women were forced to prefer the stable men over the fun guys. And that's why we had civilization. You cannot have civilization just based on consequence-free sex. So that's why conservatives prefer societies without consequence-free sex, because we like civilization. Okay. And I'm not a conservative. I figured all this out. Like, when it came to, you shouldn't have sex before marriage and you shouldn't have, sleep around. I needed all the scientific explanations for that to understand why I shouldn't do that before I decided not to. Because, here's why monogamy is good. You don't need marriage. You just need cultural monogamy. And you can have serial monogamy. I grew up in, like I said, the Bible Belt. I saw all sorts of relationships. But the most common one was serial monogamy, where, people dated. In high school, people had sex in high school. I don't know how old people started, when they started having sex, but I know. Everyone I went to high school with they were having sex. Some of them were waiting till marriage, but most of them were having sex. And they were having sex with their boyfriends, their girlfriends. It wasn't hooking up. It wasn't, I went to a party and had sex with someone. It was, we're making the relationship the center of our dating strategy instead of the sex, the center of the dating strategy. So that's where modern people really fuck up, is they base everything around the act of sex. That's why the porn industry is so big. That's why OnlyFans models are so big. That's why hookup culture is so big. If people prioritize relationships and then had sex as a nice side effect of the relationship, it would solve so many problems in society, including single mothers, and here's another thing about, why shouldn't women sleep around? Or why shouldn't, and men too, men should also not sleep around. Because it has something to do with a thing called pair bonding, right? So for women, if you have sex with a man, you release all these endorphins that make you want to stick with that man. It's why, like, if you think back to the first time you had sex, the guy that took your virginity, you were probably very, like, happy, giddy with him. Like, he made you giggle effortlessly. And that's called pair bonding. But the 6th, 7th, 25th man you had sex with, you don't pair bond with anymore. Men are like that too, to an extent. I think it's not nearly as strong as it is, but it still exists. And you also can't have a civilization where men are just banging all the chicks they want and all the women are virgins. Mathematically, it doesn't add up. You know, if we want the women to not be hoes, then we can't be hoes ourselves, men. Sorry. That's just how it works. That's math. So that's why monogamy is best, and you should try and base your civilization around relationships. Because if you pursue healthy relationships, then you can create strong families. Strong families create healthy kids. And here's a good reason why you want to have kids. Like, kids are fun, they're cute, they teach you so much about life, they motivate you to do better in life. If you like keeping up with your friends from high school, you're going to grow apart from them unless you have kids. If you have kids, especially if they're like the same age as your friends' kids, well, guess what? They're going to go play together. You're going to babysit each other's kids. You know, this weekend, their kids are going to stay the night at your house with your kids. Next weekend, your kids can go spend the night at their house with their kids, which leaves you free time to make more babies or go do whatever. So this is kind of why all this is important. Now, this also leads into gender roles, okay? So if we're having a civilization with strong families and everything is based on relationships instead of just sex, well, what does that say about a man's position and a woman's position? Well, a man is going to have to be a provider if he wants to have a family, which means he's going to have certain traits. Women also are going to have certain traits if they want to be a mother. They're going to have to be loving, nurturing, some form of not aggressive, not vicious, not argumentative. You're going to have to make a nice home. See, the way the ancient Greeks did it and the way that they do it in not just Greece, but like almost every country. The man took care of the stuff outside of the home. The women took care of things inside the home. This is why women like, decorating, cooking, all that sort of stuff. We let them take care of that stuff, and we go out and bring food to the table, make the money, etc. It's a symbiotic relationship. It's a partnership. But since we have hookup culture, we have people thinking that they can redefine gender norms. And to an extent, there is a little wiggle room, to be honest. You can have more feminine men in society, and you can have more masculine women, but you got to draw the line somewhere. And the most obvious line that's drawn in the stone, not even in the sand, in the stone, and the reinforced high carbon steel, is biology. Now, this is the last topic I want to talk about because I thought, okay, I got to talk about sex, dating, family, values, abortion, circumcision, and biology. Let me give you a bit of background on biology and why I care about it. So, I grew up thinking the world was 6,000 years old. We all come from Adam and Eve. And all the animals were just bloop, 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 placed here as they are now. And that's that. Once I realized that's not true, which evolution, look, it's obviously true. I figured it out when I was a kid. I noticed that, hey, my dog they don't look like me, but they have two eyes, they have a mouth, It's got teeth. The mouth closes this way. They got a tongue on the bottom of the mouth. They got a nose with 2 nostrils. They got 2 ears on the sides of their head. They got 4 legs. I got 4 legs, or like 4 limbs. They got a spine. They've got, like, everything about them. I have the same thing, just kind of in different shapes and in different locations. And I thought about it. I'm like, every mammal is the same, is like that. I can't think of a 6-legged mammal, or and like the only exception to that, you got to go really far and look at snakes, as far as what do you call it? An animal with a spine, a vertebrate. You got, like, the only vertebrate that doesn't have 4 legs is maybe like something in the water. Well, whales, dolphins, they kind of have 4 legs. They're just fins or flippers or whatever you call it. Snakes actually still have vestigial legs. They do. It's only the bigger species you can really tell, but it's there. So, like, evolution is real. And when I was an atheist, like I said, I was a liberal for a couple weeks. Maybe about 3 to 6 months I was a liberal. Simply because I realized, okay, look, if God's not real, if religion is made up, then it really has no place in political policy. So I was a liberal for a little bit. So what does that have to do with biology? Well, I had a soft spot for biology because it was kind of the subject that freed me from this false belief. I love being proven wrong. All of us people on the right, for the most part, love being proven wrong because it improves our understanding of reality. Our first priority on the right is to understand reality so we can use our freedom of thought to make the right appropriate choices to live in the world. Because, like I said, us humans are unique. Humans are unique in that we are learning based instead of instinct based for the most part. And so we need freedom of speech in order to convey all the different opinions and ideas to each other so we can make the right choices with our freedom of thought. Okay, so biology is important. Biology means that every single life form has a unique set of DNA, which is like its thumbprint on a way more intricate, intimate level. It's the building blocks of your unique, exact, individual, what makes you you. Everyone has different, unique DNA. And so the thing about that, when it comes to biology, that blows my mind about people on the left, is that they give any quarter to this notion of transgenderism. They act like getting a surgery that does not give you the genitals of the opposite sex. It doesn't. It gives you a mutilated genitalia that might kind of, to an extent, mimic certain basic aspects of the opposite gender. Like, okay, male to female sex change gives you a hole between your legs, but you don't have an actual clitoris. You don't have an actual, without naming off all the parts, you don't have a fully functioning, you don't bleed, you can't get pregnant. You don't have the exact, it's not the same thing. Your DNA is still male. Your bone structure is still male. You are designed for combat. You're designed for physical labor. You have to take hormones to change your physical body. If you're born in the wrong body, why do you prioritize changing your body to fit your mind instead of changing your mind to fit your body? No one is born in the wrong body. This gender thing has been pushed for years, much longer than you might realize. This existed way back in the Weimar Republic. which the notion of sexual liberation, sexual freedom, I would have scoffed at this years ago, but I cannot deny reality. There are people on the left right now defending pedophilia as a sexual orientation. Now, I'm a huge fan of tackling pedophilia from a scientific viewpoint in order to defeat it and protect children, okay? I don't believe you should put all pedophiles in wood chippers. I believe you should study them. They should be in a lab somewhere where we're able to measure what makes their brain tick so we can prevent it in future generations. So we can, control what kinds of people are around kids, and we can look for it, so they're not sneaking around. We can measure it. If someone gets a speeding ticket, well, maybe not a speeding ticket, but if someone gets arrested for anything, not instead of just fingerprinting them, give them a quick brain scan to see if they're a pedophile or not. You know what I'm saying? But however we agree or disagree about that, you have to at least understand that children cannot consent to sex. If you don't believe that, then you really do deserve a wood chipper. You're not redeemable. You're not a good person. This is some of that consequences of subjective moral values, of consequence-free sex. Strangely enough, sadly enough. Why did we fight against gay marriage for so long? I didn't. I supported gay marriage. And the Christians said it's a slippery slope. It's going to get really crazy. If you permit that, then it's going to get really crazy. And you're going to have, trans stuff going on. I didn't believe him. Because gays, that's natural. It's normal for a percentage of the population to be gay. But they were right. The Christians were right about that. Gay marriage did kind of lead to all this weird trans stuff. So the reality is, if you are transgender, anyone who is transgender, it's a mental disorder because your mind does not match with reality. If your mind doesn't match with reality, that's a mental disorder. If you see things that are not there, that's schizophrenia. You hear voices that aren't there, that's bad. If you are having hallucinations, if you're like anxiety is fear of something that's not really there. If you're being shot at and you're anxious, that's good. You should be anxious when you're being shot at. If you are anxious to step outside your house, your fear of danger does not accurately reflect the reality of your danger. Mental health disorders are based on your relation to reality. Bipolar is where you're way too happy for your real situation, or you're way too angry for a stimuli that should not have angered you that much. Psychopathy, you don't feel certain things that you should feel. You don't feel empathy. So if you were born with a penis, but you think you're a woman, your physical body does not, like your mind does not coincide with your physical body. There's a problem there. So maybe instead of taking hormones to change your sex or to change into the sex you think you are supposed to be, why not take hormones to fix it? If you're a male and you think you're a female, why not take more testosterone? Or vice versa. If you're a woman, you think you're a man, take some estrogen. Why try and fight nature and force yourself into a fake body that's neither male nor female, but some abomination of a combination? Because when women turn into men with this trans surgery, they're not growing a real penis. They don't have a foreskin or a head of a penis or working balls. They have a bunch of fat from their arm that's like glued or sewed to their pubic area that just kind of looks like a penis. It makes them feel like they have a penis. They cut their breasts off so they can feel like a man. When there's, look at Cenk Uygur. He's got man tits. You don't want to feel like Cenk Uygur? You saying he's not a man because he's got big floppy man tits? That's not very nice. So look, family values, protecting children, having sex within a serious monogamous relationship, dating, putting relationships, healthy relationships, at the center of your dating strategy instead of getting laid, having fun and partying. Let that be a side effect of it. You think people in monogamous relationships don't have fun? Of course they do. You think you can't party with your girlfriend? You think you can only party if you're single? Just try it, dude. Like if you can't have fun with your boyfriend or girlfriend, then you don't have the right boyfriend or girlfriend. You need to find the right person for you. And don't have sex with someone just because you're attracted to them. If you're attracted to somebody, go on a date with them. Go have lunch with them. Go rock climbing with them. Go find interests that you share or a new interest. Go learn something new with them. Go on a road trip with them. And if you click well and you think you can spend some time with them and you want to actually date them, then have sex with them. You don't have to be married, but you don't have to, but you shouldn't hook up, because hookup culture leads to no one having the capacity to love anyone anymore, because your pair bonding is depleted, your dopamine is gone. Sex is like sugar. And this is what I'm going to leave with. This is the perfect metaphor for all sorts of things, especially porn addiction, talking about sex. So humans developed a sweet tooth because 10,000 years ago, the only food was the stuff that grew out of the ground or the animals you killed. That's it. Humans need glucose. We need sugar. Our number one, pretty much the only source of fuel for our brain is glucose, which comes in starch. Starchy plants. Fructose comes in fruit. That's also really useful for us. We need sugar. We are starchivores. And sugar by itself isn't really great for us, but it's like icing on the cake, Imagine the perfect human food was cake, but the cake itself. But cake is kind of bland. The icing on top is the delicious stuff that makes you want to eat it. That's why you eat the cake. When it comes to fruit, fruit is sweet. It tastes good. And it tastes good to us because it's got everything that we need. That's why we evolved to appreciate sugar, because we need the fiber that's in the sugar. We need all the antioxidants and nutrients that come in the sugar. We don't need the sugar by itself. We didn't evolve a sweet tooth because all of our ancestors drank apple juice, but because they ate apples. That's why we have a sweet tooth. Now with all this isolated sugar by itself, you're getting all of the happiness, all the dopamine from sugar and more, because it's more intense. It's more, there's more sugar in one Mountain Dew than in a whole orchard of apples. And I mean, nothing against Mountain Dew, I guess soda in general. And, but there's no fiber in soda. There's no antioxidants and nutrients that you would get from an apple. And so our ancestors developed this urge for sugar because the only sugar around was healthy fruits and potatoes and tubers and root vegetables and wheat and barley and things like that. And so we developed a love of these plants because of the sugar in them. And that was the healthiest food we could eat. But when you replace that with sweet, like candy, junk food stuff that has the sugar, the taste, but it doesn't have the benefits, then you have bad health. If, sex should be the icing on the cake to a relationship. You should pursue healthy relationships first and then have sex. That way, sex is like the bonding exercise that creates new life, rather than some shameful, drunken thing that you do awkwardly with someone you barely know. And then you don't talk to them again. And then you repeat next weekend. That's not healthy. That's not happy. That's filling a void. It's dressing a wound, not treating the cure, or it's not curing the problem. It's not treating the cause. It's treating a symptom of loneliness, of broken family syndrome, of living in a society that doesn't value you. So you do something that makes you feel validated, and valued in the moment. Oh, if she lets me fuck her, then she must respect me. Oh, if he bangs me, then he must think I'm pretty. He must like me or something. It validates me. How about instead of just seeking validation and base pleasure, we actually seek out relationships with fellow human beings so we can create a better civilization. So we have people that have our backs. So we have children that keep us connected to the world in our old age. So we're not dying at 80 alone in some nursing home, being run by people that come and go, that don't care about us, that might abuse us. We have kids that will take care of us. Kids that we can watch them grow and help form them into future generations. Why would you give that up for Tinder? All right. Thanks, everybody. I got to go grab my breakfast. Have a great day.